Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Conscious Conversation with Juno. Today we have our what? Oh, this is sponsored by the House of H. I forgot to say that. This is,
But
uh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear it.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to another Conscious Conversation. I'm Juno, your host. This podcast or video cast, whatever, is sponsored by the House of H. Today we have a wonderful guest, David Dunn. Please say hello, David. How are you doing today?
I am doing well enough, and hello, everybody.
Yay. So, I'm not going to assume that everyone knows who you are. So, David, can you tell us some stuff about yourself? Can you tell us who you are, what you do, what brings you here today?
Sure. Um, I am. I do a lot of things. I'm a rabbi. I have a private practice in spiritual counseling. I have a private practice in spiritual erotic body work with gay men. I had an let's see, I was ordained in 2003. I've been a congregational rabbi, community organizer, um, and I have in previous career. I directed theater and opera. The opera work was international. I directed in Germany, in the Czech Republic, in Israel, and as well as all over the United States. Um, and Yeah, and when I was when I lived in New York and was temping in between theater and opera gigs, I used to proofread the Avon catalog.
I love that. I love the Avon catalog.
Yeah,
Uh, I had no idea that you were in theater. I learned something new today.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know you didn't know.
Yeah. You've always been known to, you were first introduced to me as Rabbi David. So I was like, oh, this guy's a rabbi. Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I love that. Okay. So, David, question.
Yes. Okay.
Growing up, what was like when as you came into the knowledge of being queer or being different, whatever that looks like for you in that moment,
hmm
how
hmm
did you see that in your spiritual, like in your religious or spiritual existence? How is that reflected back at you? And then we can ask more questions after that.
Okay. Unusually for someone who is ordained clergy, um, I didn't have any kind of religious education. When So I was born in 1960, and the when we lived just outside of Detroit, and we went to a Unitarian Universalist church there. So that was my first religious home. We moved to Philadelphia. I went to a Quaker school. Um, I went to a Protestant college. I have been immersed in Italian opera, and so kind of a very theatrical or theatricalized Roman Catholicism for a long time. And I let's see, by age 34, I think I'd been to a synagogue three times in my life. And by age 37, I was a rabbinical student. So there wasn't a fixed spiritual or religious background that I had to reckon with. Um, you gave me a little bit of an alert on this question, and the thing that first came to mind is that as so especially in my era, there I was very closeted. I spent most of, although I was kind of made by everybody. I was the class fag in uh, high school, but my response then was to deny, deny, deny until I went to college. Um, so I think as a gay kid in my era, there weren't a lot of people to talk to. So a lot of my life was lived inside my head. I did a lot of talking to myself. And I started, I think, I don't know, I mean, I can remember at one point talking to stuffed animals. Uh, and I can remember at some point sort of, starting to talk to God. Um, I never confused the two. And it could
That's
have
very
happened.
fair.
It could have happened,
Yeah.
Um, and But I think, when you get used to asking big questions, why questions, um, they have to go somewhere. And if there's nobody to ask, you just sort of send them into the universe, send them into the ether. And I think that's what I did. And it is easier to, I guess, give them an address. So send the message to God than to just keep, dropping unaddressed envelopes into the mailbox.
So
And um,
growing,
so I
and
just want to say that
yeah,
I think one of my definitions of God is still God is the listening ear uh, that's always available to speak to.
I love that. But so I have a question kind of about the formative years, which was like, so it sounds like you grew up with universally like a belief in something, but it wasn't necessarily specific that like this was how belief works and this is like the only or most correct answer to this approach or this thing.
Hmm. Would you actually ask that again? I confess to have been slightly distracted by my video screen, but
Yeah.
but seriously, ask the question. Ask the question again. Doesn't have
Yeah.
to be the same words. Doesn't have to be any different words. Just need to hear it again.
My question was, do you think that growing up the way you did, because it seems to me that there wasn't an approach of this is how belief happens, or this is the one frame or lens through which we understand this thing. Do you under, it sounds like because there was not that structure, that it was easier to grow up uh exploring your queerness internally, even if it wasn't externalized for a long time?
No, I
Or what do
can't.
you
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't answer that comparatively. I can't say easier or harder. Um, but I do understand it to be different. Yeah,
less friction, let's say that. Like, was there
well,
less internal friction?
no, uh, I grew up in 1960s, like Protestant imprinted America. There was enough friction. You could just breathe in the friction. You
Yeah.
did not need to have a church, didn't need to have a religion to feel as a queer person, as a gay person, that there was friction. I used to, I, I remember in college, I used to envy um, my friends who were raised Catholic just because they had great stories. And I sort of I was sad about the fact that I didn't have stories. Like what it was like. Uh, Being in the church, dodging, um, your priest or whatever it was. Just that. So I didn't have a narrative background. I think there's something more entertaining about hearing somebody talk about how their preacher or their priest condemned homosexuality, queerness, and by maybe not individually, but it felt like that they were being condemned. I think like uh, I think having somebody or something really to fight with, to argue against, to have a church you could leave, a religion you could turn your back on, as opposed to um, just the sense of kind of of what we call ambient homophobia of of
I love
American
that.
culture,
A low din of homophobia.
a low din of homophobia. Um, so I think there's some, I think in a way, I'm not disputing that the harm done to people by their religions, but I think there is something to be said about having something to fight back against, as opposed to just thinking, I'm, everything around me is pointing to something different than who I am, so that I'm just wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there certainly is an aspect I that I haven't really thought about before, where it's like, how do you know what you are until you know what you're not? and like
Hmm.
that within the confines of a spiritual practice or a spiritual belief system could be very helpful for growth and and self-identification
Hmm.
in a
Yeah.
way. So that's an interesting approach that I'd never really thought about. So thank you for that. Um, so growing up queer,
Hmm.
and what was your so aside from stuffed animals and talking to
Yep.
God, like when did you, as you were in the growth process, because from 1960 to let's say 1985, right? You're
Right.
like 25 at that point, so you've gone through college, but you're also amidst you're post-Vietnam and living through the AIDS crisis.
Sure. So yes, um, just sort of points of information. I came out to my parents when I think I was 13 or 14. Um, and uh, by the time I went to college, so I went to college at 17, and I made a vow to myself that I would never again tell somebody I was straight. I might not come out to them as gay immediately, but I wouldn't tell them I was straight. And I actually broke that vow twice in my adult life, both times when I was a language student in Germany, different years. But I was, I just felt isolated enough, like no friends on hand, that I occasionally lied to fellow students. But I stopped lying at a certain point.
The
Uh,
desire to appear safe will make you do wild things.
it will. It absolutely will. And I don't know if you remember, but I have a couple of tattoos. So I have a Star of David over my heart, and I have one on my left biceps that says "So gay." So the two aspects of my identity that I might ever want to conceal are ones that are, I deliberately kind of imprinted them on me. I can't run from them.
Mm.
Um, I figured I probably also um, can't ever go swimming publicly anywhere uh, in the in the Muslim world, just because it's all I can't actually deny it. But no, it's like so. Um, yeah, I just kind of made sure that I kind of blocked all my escape hatches.
I guess it's good, but it requires awareness.
Sure. Yeah.
So when you are coming out at 13,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
What was the lead up to that like? Because that's 1973.
Yeah.
So we're experiencing like the Cardigans and and
Oh
all of that
man.
musically. We're
Oh,
Janis Joplin, all that, right? That's
oh
like the musical moment that's happening. And so in the background, it's like,
by 13, I was already an opera queen. I'm in my seventh decade of ignorance about popular music. In fact, my first decade was probably the only one where I knew anything because there were the Beatles. But once I got into like I locked on to opera, um, I just ignored everything. I don't hear non classical music. I just don't. I mean, show tunes notwithstanding, of course. But
yeah, of
like,
course.
if I go, when I if I go to a bar with people, we'll be there for about 45 minutes, and then somebody will be like, "Oh man, finally they put something good on," and I think it changed. Like I just, it's all white noise to me.
Oh,
So sorry. So the music. So Janis Joplin is not a kind of a it's not a cultural point of orientation for me. I so
for me, I'm more
but
just trying to paint a picture societally because I know that like
well,
there are many different people
okay,
listening to this.
all right. So 1970, my family moved from Detroit to Philadelphia. Um, Philadelphia had one and still does had a very prominent gay scene.
Boys
Uh,
Town, yeah.
um, uh, we say neighborhood. It
You
was
have a neighborhood.
the
What
neighborhood,
town is Chicago or
Chicago,
San Francisco?
Chicago, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so there were we actually had one fully explicitly out teacher at the high school I went to. We had a number of gay teachers back then, but only one guy. Um, May his memory be for a blessing. His name was Peter Dunning, and he had been, I think, the president of whatever the I don't know, Gay and Lesbian Alliance, whatever there was in Philadelphia at that time. But Philadelphia had a very serious political gay scene. Mark Siegel, who is the publisher of the Philadelphia Gay News, he's the one who, I think uh, he chained himself to a camera or something on the Merv Griffin show. He at one point, um, so the central intersection of Philadelphia is Broad Street and Market Street, and that's where City Hall is. And at some point, he managed to get up into the spire of City Hall and um, with a two-piece like gay pride banner that he like velcroed together and managed to hang out the window. So
I love
before
that.
so traffic kind of stopped on Market Street because everybody's looking up at this sign. So that was part of Philadelphia, and I remember there was he was kind of the focus of an interview in the Philadelphia in the magazine section of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I must have been 12 or 13, and I remember that, and so it was like so it was still a fight. I mean, the fight was by no means it was the fight was really just starting, but we were only at I moved here basically the year after Stonewall. So everything was very new, very militant. I didn't realize, in fact, I didn't know enough about Stonewall or about life and the passage of the, um, that I was there at the beginning of something. Um, so I know it was, so it was there. That much I knew. Um, and I realized, um, so when I moved to Philadelphia from Detroit, I was at a school that uh, it was a very progressive school, and it was super, in fact, it did not even have. We had PE class, but we didn't have a gym. And we moved to Philadelphia, and I went to a school that had two gymnasiums and a soccer field. So there were locker rooms, and I was like, I was, and
Awakening moment.
oh yeah, no, I was, I looked and I was like, oh, got it. Like, not comfortably. Please don't, I can be funny about it now, but
Yeah.
back then I was just, but something did click, and so I realized that there was such a thing as gay, and that I was such a thing as gay, pretty much at the same moment. I was early adolescent. Um, I got busted staring at a guy in the school locker room. This is part of a kind of whatever EMDR this in therapy a zillion times, but um, yeah, I remember just I was just looking at this dude, and I remember hearing a voice say, "Hey, everybody, this kid is looking at my dick," and it took me a while to realize that I was
That
this
you were the
kid.
kid.
I was the
Yeah.
kid. So it just kind of like the news arrived. It was not it was not packaged comfortably. Like
Yeah.
so, yeah,
So then
and
what is coming out to your parents like when you realize you're different and the different thing that you realize is something that you are, and it's also culturally not like the best time for that.
yeah, okay. So there is a cute story. We had a gay hotline. I think I must have learned about in Philadelphia, like it was in the phone books. We still had phone books, and
I love this already.
and I must have learned about it in the article in the newspaper. I don't know how else I would have known there was a gay hotline. Um, but uh, you know, in my early adolescence, I made life miserable for those people. Like I just pictured them like, answering the phone and being like, "Hello, Philadelphia gay hotline. Just a moment, please. It's David again. You did. I did yesterday. I mean, I just, because I couldn't talk to people at school, right? Who else am I going to talk to? So I would call them up and I would call them up. And this is Philadelphia. They were, most of them, Catholic kids from South Philadelphia, whose parents many of whom had been kicked out of the house by their parents. Um, like, don't darken our doorstep again, kind of thing. And so I, um, I obviously lived in my parents' house. I lived at home, and I was like, okay, so this is the risk I take. If I tell my parents, this could happen. And I was like one night, I don't know what it was, but like because I had actually been pretty close to my parents all my life, I thought, well, I can't not tell them, right? How do I? And I'm not a very good liar in over a long term. I can sort of, I can squirm my way out of one moment, but like I can't be telling that. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Not sustainable. Thank you. Not a sustainable resource. And I was watching TV, and it was a movie version of a Sigmund Romberg operetta called The Desert Song. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sigmund Romberg. I don't know if you certainly, The Desert Song, but it's like just a very kind of campy, romantic sort of, guy in his sort of desert attire, sweeping the girl off of her feet. And was watching, it was on the Late Show. And I thought, well, I have to wait till after the movie because I can't not see the end of this movie. So I waited to tell my parents until something like midnight or 1 a.m. I woke them up because I didn't want to be kicked out of the house before the end of the Desert Song.
Totally valid.
It made sense at the time. Um, they were both, my parents, both of them are deceased, um, were kind of very compassionate and, sorry, Alf Lawson's on its way.
Yeah.
Talk amongst yourself. Um,
I have a lozenge too. I popped it in at the beginning of the interview because I was like, I've been a little coffee lately.
there you go. Brought to you by Ricola. Um, so they were kindly spoken. They, they loved me. They assured me that I was loved. They also assured me that I was too young to know who I was or what I was. And they sent me to a Freudian psychiatrist. Um, it was early 70s. And I give them credit. Like,
I was gonna say for that time period, that's very progressive.
right. Yeah. I mean, they really didn't have a clue. My mom was an educator. When she died, uh, she died about 2 years ago or so, but she finally stopped teaching. She ended an unbroken 66-year-long career as an educator. So I think she was used to dealing with um, young people and their problems. Um, Neither of my parents wanted a gay son, and I guess they both thought, it was something that could be halted or slowed or cured or something. But they always loved me. They would never have been mean. We had a bad 4 years, I'll tell you that much, of just um, I knew I was loved, but I just couldn't talk to them after this. So, we had 4 years of like, I would either, if we were walking someplace together, I would walk either 4 feet ahead of them or 4 feet behind them, but I wouldn't walk with them on the sidewalk. And eventually, um, yeah, we had it out my freshman year in college where they were like, you know, I, I didn't tell them anything particularly, you know, I thought I was being kind of evasive or whatever, but, they put two and two together. They were very smart people. And I remember they called me home and said, you need to come down, you know, this weekend and we need to talk. And I was like, I have a French exam on Monday and like, this is not good. And I said, is this an order? Like, are you saying I have to come home? And very kind of typically for my father, he said, no, but I think we all know when we need to talk. And I was like, fine, you pay for the train ticket and I will come home. And um, so I Amtrak down. We had it out in the living room where they kept saying, it's a phase, keep your options open. And I said, if this is a phase, then I'm going to live in this phase. And then when there's another phase, I'll do that one. But no, this is,
Very fair approach to
I,
the question or that
no,
statement.
I think I did okay. And, yeah, and then I went back up. I took the train back up to Connecticut, failed the French test, um, and life went on. But that was kind of a turning point where, like, um, I knew they didn't necessarily welcome it, I, but I wasn't gonna pretend. I certainly wasn't gonna pretend to them that I wasn't gay, and it evolved to the point that they welcomed all my boyfriends, at home. Um, they really got to know and love a lot of my gay friends. They mourned the ones who died of AIDS. It was, so my parents had a longer journey about my gayness than I did.
Yeah.
So I bless them for that. All right. But okay. What was the question?
Um, I think I
That may have,
asked.
that may have been the question. Like, how do
Yeah,
how,
I think that was like essentially like what was coming out at a time period like that. Like this is the point of the podcast. It's kind of like meandering thoughts and
okay.
feelings about like queerness and
Okay.
spirituality.
All right.
So don't worry, you're not doing it wrong.
Yay.
Um, but okay, so you're in your 20s. You have the background noise or the din of the AIDS crisis happening. Something that I would love to ask you as a
Hmm.
queer person and seeing the AIDS crisis at first referred to as GRID. What was that like? Because before it
Well,
was AIDS or HIV, it was or the human immune uh, deficiency
yeah,
syndrome, like
no, but
or
um,
acquired
I,
immune deficiency.
I can go one phase earlier than that,
Okay, yeah,
which is okay. So, um, my first career was in theater and in opera. So I graduated college and I spent a summer at the Williamstown Theater Festival, and then in the fall I started at what was then the Washington Opera, now the Washington National Opera. Now it is the opera company that just moved out of the Trump Kennedy Center
hmm
in protest. So I worked I worked there for 2 seasons, 1981 to 1984, and so um, you know, urban opera company, like it's everybody's gay. There's just so much gay.
yeah,
Um, and 1981 was the year that the New York Times article came out on whatever, like page 18 or whatever it was, that said strange um, cancer striking gay men.
yeah.
Um, so I remember talking with oh man, um, so Charles Elson and Company was the wig and makeup uh, depart firm that we used, and all the guys that were known as the Elsonettes, and I was just chatting with one of the Elsonettes, and all but one of them died, right? Um, and like we're talking about, like, what are what are you doing? How are you handling things? And and Miss Harvey, um, Miss Harvey, by the way, had been one of the original dancers in the ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo, the all male gay,
Hmm.
drag ballet company in New York. And I said, I asked them, where's your car parked? You know, what are you doing do you have to do anything in the morning? Do you have gay cancer? Um, so I remember when it was gay cancer. Um, and we didn't even understand that it was an immune thing. We thought it was gay cancer. We thought it was somehow Kaposi's. I remember. Um, did you ever hear of the Bob Dameron Gay Guide? This was like
No.
before there was an internet. You could buy like a book about, you know, like double this size, and it was the Bob Dameron Guide to Gay Life Around the World. Like bars, you could go to, these bars. You could cruise these parks. You could do this or that. Um, and I remember at one point owning an edition that was just like, um, everybody got be careful. We think it's poppers. We don't know how it's happening, but a lot of gay men who use poppers are getting very, very sick. So everybody, like, stop using poppers.
Slow down with the poppers. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Um. So we knew nothing, 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 nothing. Um. Oh, it was terrifying. Um. Like, I was one of those people who, like, every freckle, every pimple, every bump, I would, like, go to see the doctor again, and they'd be like, no, not.
I
Um,
can only imagine. I can only imagine the like level of hysteria that that must have felt like. I mean, I actually can kind of imagine post-COVID, but I imagine it was very different.
COVID reawakened the feelings for a bunch of us of, like, contagious death, just, and not really certain you know, how do you protect yourself or protect other people? Um, Golly, I remember being on a date with somebody. Oh man, he was adorable. Last name Kennedy, can't remember first name. Michael. Um, and like it was like, you know, so would love to kiss you goodnight, but I have this weird mouth thing going on. Like, so like herpes? He said, no, it's a fungus and it's called Candida. Whatever. I mean, that was one of the opportunistic infections.
Hmm.
You know, um, so there was no saying, you know, he just, he died. This was like 1982.
So then you're, as you're seeing this around you, right?
Hmm.
How does that inform how you feel about being queer in this like spectrum or in this moment, which you didn't maybe realize was a historic moment until after, but like
Of course.
you're living through
Yeah.
the birth and the awareness of something. So, and because it was after it was called gay cancer, it was called like GRID, and then it became HIV and AIDS and stuff like that. But like as this thing is being ascribed to your community, how does that inform how you feel about yourself in that moment? Because you're in your 20s, mid 20s. That's
Yeah, early 20s.
yeah, early mid 20s. That's a very developmental period in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
like how you see yourself.
Um, these are good questions. I'm sorry. It's taken me a little while to ponder them. Um, we all lived in fear. We knew, I mean, there was a book and a poster way back when that said a virus has no morals, right? It's a virus. It's not a judgment. And at the same time, so we kind of knew scientifically it was not, it was something within our community, but um, it was kind of hard to say, this could happen to straight people too, except we never saw it. We never saw it happen to straight people. Um, we, and it was, it was so early. Like, I graduated college in 81. Um, by the time we were halfway through my first season at Washington Opera, 81, 82, we were already worried, paranoid. Um, but it also, um, it forged community in a way. I'm sure I'm not the only person who talked about it. It was horror. It was a horror show. It was unimaginable. And it was also like it gave another level of meaning to being part of the gay community. You know, it, I joked about like not having, you know, a religion to fight against. We had a disease to fight against.
Yeah, very much
Uh,
so.
so it gave a political focus to the experience of being gay. And a political focus meant it was a communal thing. Act Up, whatever. All of the different organizations. I moved to New York in '85, and I went to volunteer. So I volunteered at the Gay Men's Health Crisis, and I was part of the information team. Like we would do tables on the street corners or at like health fairs or things like that, and then on the hotline. Um, I remember my application essay there, because you had to figure out, or I felt I had to like deal with the fact that I had all these things I wanted to do and wanted to be in life, and I might not live that long. I kind of assumed I wouldn't. Um, like we all, I think we all, in a way, assumed we wouldn't until we understood what where the danger was, how you protected yourself, etc. Um, but I remember I just said like, so life is, the importance of life has to be something other than longevity. Like you know, it couldn't, the value of life couldn't be measured by longevity because the greatest, most beautiful people in the world were dying very, very young. And so like you had to figure, so it was like kind of, I had to figure out like, okay, what was important in life? Um, and I thought, okay, damn it, if I get sick, um, well, then I intend to be the most well-read person in the ICU. Like I will read, I will like live my culturally very rich life, theater, opera, literature, you know, the, international. Um, you made the most of the
So
moments you
you
have.
alchemized your fear through art in some capacity.
I need to have you like to sort of just go like just take my ramblings and put them into nice to phrase them beautifully. Thank you. It's beautiful. Yes. Um yeah, you just had, yeah, there was no, like everything had a poignancy to it. Everything, every moment could actually be your last moment. uh,
Yeah.
and so yeah, there was an intensity and a focus and a sense of community and purpose that all happened at the same time.
And so it kind of through the pressure cooker that was being queer in the 80s,
Hmm.
it'll and like I mean, you were also being shaped as a 20-year-old specifically in that,
Hmm.
which I think when I was in my 20s, it was a wonderful like experiment for who I was becoming. And I
Hmm.
think for many people, that's what that age range. I don't want to say that's what it should be, but I hope that people get to experiment with themselves in
Yeah,
their earlier life.
right. I don't. Yeah, I think.
But it sounds
I'm,
like that really forged you and
yeah,
like fortified you.
yeah. I'm making this part like you know up as go along. I don't think we thought we didn't have time to experiment. I mean, of course, everything was an experiment, but we didn't think we had time to like, oh, try this, try that, or something. You had to engage. You had to politicize. You had to mobilize. Uh,
I think
I,
part of that also has to do with the fact that you weren't separated as much socially. Like as much as cell phones have shrank the size of the world, it also has
well, yeah,
affected the way we participate with the world. And I
sure,
think that the fact that that wasn't even on the table as an option is
yeah,
really what I don't want to say like cell phones killed community, but I think that cell phones in many ways, or like the immediacy of the illusion of social media or the illusion
hmm
of the closeness that it facilitates, I think living a time period like that without the modern trappings of today's technology must have been very
So
it made everything from what I would perceive more like visceral and raw and
what?
real.
All right, I'm counting on your pop culture knowledge. The famous song was like um something like disco killed the radio.
Video
Uh,
killed the radio star. Devo.
video killed the radio.
Yes.
Um, you know, uh, cell phones and apps killed the bars.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you used to, you know, cruise just wherever you went. You made eye contact. You talked to you talked with the people you worked with. You knew. Um, so everything was, yeah, it was, it was right there in front of you. It was, uh, yeah, there was no um, like mediating or distancing presence. It was the people right there in front of you, whom you cruised, whom you talked to, whom you dated, who became your community, um, and uh, and whom you didn't see for 2 months, and then when you saw them, you didn't recognize them because they lost 80 pounds and had turned purple.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was just all like right there, real time, real life, real time. There was nothing, you know, yeah, you couldn't like uh, save something on your phone. Like you had to write it down. We had address books.
Yes. Yeah. I used to have an address book.
Wow. Um, and friends of mine eventually threw their address books away because they just got a new book because it was so hard to cross out another name.
Yeah.
No. All right. Next question.
Um, yeah. Thank you, by the way, for being as vulnerable because I know that like I can't imagine that any of that is easy to revisit. That's my opinion.
Different,
Um,
differently difficult on different days. So
so how then, after post living through this, so you said you were 37 when you went to rabbinical studies, right?
yeah,
So that's 1997 then.
it is absolutely.
So this is an interesting idea for me. At what point, if ever,
Hmm.
did HIV feel like you could, like HIV AIDS and that whole epidemic, at what point, if ever, did you feel like you could kind of exhale from it a little bit? And how did that inform your decision, or did it not inform your decision to study like rabbinical arts and what took you kind of down that road?
Oh no! So in 1997, it was the cocktail had barely emerged. We all had friends. And I can remember people who just if they had survived 2 months longer, they'd be alive today. But so 1997 was still Um, it was it was still the Holocaust, and um, so when I applied to rabbinical school again, my application looked a little funny because it said Jewish background, and that page was blank because I didn't have any Jewish background. I was Jewish technically, but I didn't have any Jewish background really. Um, but like other, but you know, the page that was like other interests and experience, it was gay, 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 gay all over the place. Um, and AIDS, AIDS, AIDS all over the place. Um, so this is particular to the movement of Judaism that I belong to, I'm part of, and where I was educated rabbinically. But there's a saying by our founding rabbi, Mordechai Kaplan, may his memory be for a blessing. Um, uh, in Judaism as a civilization, and that in Judaism as a civilization, um, belonging precedes believing. Um, you are part of the Jewish people, and then maybe or maybe not you believe something, but belief is always something debatable, different for everybody. But belonging, if you're part of Jewish community, you're part of Jewish community. So once I really and I'll save it for another time, but there's a story about like my acceptance of my Jewish identity. But like once that was established, you know, then the part of me that had already been like talking to talking to myself and talking to God all those years suddenly had an intellectual and philosophical and religious framework for it.
Hmm.
So I would just I took my religiosity and parked it in Judaism. I actually tried to take it other places before, but nothing worked. Catholicism is obviously out. I tried hard to be Episcopalian, but just never could believe the mythology. Um, I tell people that because I went to a Quaker school, high school, like Quakerism on paper is the perfect religion. And if I weren't for my ADHD, I would be quicker. But I can't just sit there in silence for an hour. Like I can't do that. That's not religious for me. That's very just uncomfortable. Judaism, on the other hand, is all about turning the pages. You always have something to read, something you have to do. So Jewish worship actually not only did I inherit it, um, but it worked for me because it was, exactly where somebody with like a too busy mind always could find something to read, something to think about.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, um, yeah,
So, but when you applied to rabbinical school, like what was the thing? Because you said you tried previous uh faith
well,
structures up to that
yes,
point. So what
uh-huh.
was the moment where you were like, this, yes.
I could. Uh, my cousin Carol, uh, also a theater person. She's an actress and a director and an acting teacher. Um, she was having her own personal Jewish uh, kind of. She had more of a Jewish upbringing, but she had kind of left it, but then kind of gone secular. And then she was having a renewal of her Jewish engagement, and she just at one point just took me with her to synagogue. And I remember being sitting in the pews, like watch, the service, and just opening the prayer book and thinking, well, this is how I pray anyway. Like it
Hmm.
just made sense. And I even
So,
remember looking around the synagogue and just thinking, those people over there, that's what my family would have looked like if we'd been a Jewishly uh, affiliated family. That would have been us in that row.
so it was almost like when you were called to enter the like rabbinical studies and engage more in a more pronounced way with your
Mhm.
Jewishness. It was
Mhm.
because when you were there, you almost felt like it was a homecoming moment.
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
I'm not trying to like
yeah,
put words in
no,
your mouth,
no,
but
no, no. Believe me, if you know me by now, if I didn't like the words, I would smack them down. It was this stuff. it's definitely was definitely part of it. It also, I mean, it coincided with my decision that I was going to leave uh, the theater and opera business. I was 25. I was working for the Israeli Opera in Tel Aviv, and I realized that and it's funny to think back. No, no, what the fuck? Pardon me. No, I was 30. By then I was in my 30s. I was 37. But I realized that I had hit the ceiling on my professional uh, development or whatever. Like I had got my career had gotten as high as it was going to go. I was always going to be valuable as an assistant director in different, in an opera house. I would be, for the most part, reviving other people's stagings. And people have whole careers of that. Like just, when there are directors who are long dead, but there are people who know their stage, who assisted that person way back when and just go around and remount the production wherever it happens. Um, I could have had that career, but I just didn't want it.
Mm.
That wasn't, I knew that wasn't going to be enough for me. And I happened to be working for the Israeli Opera, and through a series of funky opera related coincidences, I happened to fall in with a bad crowd with a bunch of rabbinical students from the United States. And I thought it took me a little while, like the better part of a year, to realize that what they were doing was what I wanted to do. And there was I had one colleague, um, Rabbi Randy Scheinberg, and when she was a rabbinical student, and we were friends. And uh, she was studying in Jerusalem. I was working in Tel Aviv for the opera. The end of the work week, so on Friday, I would leave, hop on a bus to Jerusalem, go hang out with her, and then come back on Saturday night or Sunday for my rehearsals and the rest. And when she was, so we were up late one night at the end of this year, and I said, "It's so weird, I've actually been more looking forward to being with you all in Jerusalem than I have to my rehearsals in Tel Aviv." She, and she said, "Well, I wondered when you were going to talk about it." And I said, "Well, okay, I'm would they ever let somebody like me be a rabbi?" And she said, "Converts, Jews by choice, become rabbis." And I was like, "Okay." I knew what I wanted to do at that point. I'd otherwise thought I was going to go to grad school, get a master's in English or theater or something. And I would, do you ever see the movie uh, In and Out, Kevin
Yeah.
Kline?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought I was going to be the high school theater teacher who got thanked at the Tonys. And
I could have seen that path for you too.
yeah, yeah, it would have been fine. It would have been lovely. But that's what I thought I was going to do. But I happened to be in Israel, and I happened to be hanging out. I was working and living there, a very secular life. But then I fell in with this rabbinical student crowd, and I was like, they're doing what I want to do. It's studying text, it's intimate connection with people, it's poignancy, it's God, if you will, through narrative. Like, this is what I want to do.
Do you know what's interesting, or I find this interesting, is that your experience when asking somebody about like, could I be a rabbi? Could I do this? Was
Hmm.
very like open and they seemed very receptive, but they were also your friend group, right?
Yeah, but if she'd said no, David, honestly, they won't. I would have been okay. I'll figure something else out.
Well, because in high school, I very much conflated my anger with Christianity and Catholicism and the organization that is the church with
Hmm.
feelings or frustration or anger towards
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
And so I, in high school, wanted to convert to Judaism. And I remember asking a rabbi and then being like, no, we don't, you can't, or like whatever.
But,
And then later I discovered there's like a cultural thing around that where
but
like,
yeah, you have to turn somebody away 3 times.
yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
Um,
right. If you'd come back 2 more times, they'd have said yes.
yeah, but also as a,
I
as
mean,
a,
I think that's ridiculous. I never treated anybody like that. But
as a very unempowered teenager who was like feeling very not
Sure, you
at
were too
home
young.
in my own faith. It was
Yeah,
it was like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't for me. I was wrong.
right.
Um,
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I don't think you could have thought anything different.
yeah. But it was interesting because like all of my girlfriends were getting bat mitzvahs and stuff like that. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, this feels very culturally me, but
Right.
also like and I didn't know exactly how I felt about Jesus at the time. I was just angry at his followers. I like to say Jesus had the best PR team, the worst fan base. Like, um,
That's very, very funny. That's brilliant.
yeah.
Um,
So I,
uh,
I might have been Jewish at one point. In another
it,
timeline,
it,
I
it, it,
probably
it
am.
could have happened. Um, so one of the advantages, I guess, is so I didn't have the stories that I envied my Catholic friends, but I also didn't have a religion to fight against. I didn't have like a family religious culture. You know, I didn't have like a deeply imprinted religious thing to that I had to uh, conquer. I and I knew I was free to live whatever religious life I wanted to.
So
Um,
I have a question because this is less about the family aspect of it and more about the personal development aspect of it. You
mhm.
mentioned earlier that you work with queer men around intimacy.
Yeah,
And I'm I think I know what that work looks like because I know you.
you're
But
right.
can you tell me how that developed with how does that interact or not interact with your relationship with Judaism? Because generally speaking, America is a not sex positive culture,
Right,
and the Abrahamic faiths are also not known to embrace this either
right.
from my
Okay,
relationship to them.
right. Yes, and um, uh, so America is not a sex positive culture. Comparatively speaking, the gay male community is a very sex positive culture.
Yes,
So, and I was just like firmly like I was there in the middle of it, and so along with all of the fears around sex, there was also all of the workarounds, the use a condom, don't come in, somebody's mouth, don't get fucked, whatever it was. But you know, I know there were people who actually stopped having sex, like in the movie, the play Jeffrey. There are people who actually retreated from it. God help us. I mean, I feel so bad for them. I don't think some of them like never came back. Um, and um, but for everybody who was still there, it was like not. It was just like, okay, not how do we stop having sex, but how do we have sex but just not die from it?
yeah,
So, about Body Electric, yes?
I do, but please take a
And yeah,
moment.
okay. And you're keeping on the clock, by the way. We have to continue this one at another, this conversation on another day.
Oh yeah, I want to have you back. We because I want to talk to you about Kabbalah and stuff too, but I
Yeah,
just wanted a big picture
sure.
this time.
Okay, Body Electric started by a wonderful man, Joseph Kramer, uh, in I think the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s. He was he at one point had been like a Jesuit seminarian. At one point, he had raised like um, like silkworms. He had like just done a whole bunch of kind of very funky, different things, and he was a body worker, and he was the one who realized that gay men were, in fact, even given our sex positivity, that people were starting to step back to flee uh, erotic engagement with other men and uh, kind of step out of their own bodies and stop living erotically charged lives. And he's the one who came up with the idea of infusing bodily experience, erotic experience with spirituality, so that he created a whole school of spiritual erotic massage. Um, and uh, somebody brought me into that, or and it's like, okay, this is it. You know, this makes perfect sense. This is long before I even before I identified privately or publicly as as a Jew. Um, uh, but I was just spiritual. I was also in a 12-step program at that point, so that was like my first spiritual community. But I just I was like, I knew that I wanted the erotic life. I knew that I wanted spiritual meaning, and there was this community, and it was actually an international community uh, that of men who were following this. And so I moved to Germany in 1992, and I went to my first body electric workshop in New York in 92. I moved to Germany I guess in August of 92. I'm sorry, like, yeah. And um, I knew that, and I went there to learn German to work in the opera business there. Um, but I knew that Body Electric existed in Germany, and and in fact, that they sent teachers over from the States to teach. And I don't know how I did it, but I got hired as the translator for Matthew Simmons, may his memory be for a blessing, uh, who was teaching in Germany. And so he would stand up in front of the group and he would say, so you do this, you take the oil and put the oil in your hand, and you rub the guy's cock like this, and then you stroke like this. And I would go, ja, mit dem linken Hand, man nimmt den Öl, und dann mit dem rechten Hand, dann man streichelt den Schwanz. And I just started to uh, I started to channel it, so that at first he had to finish a sentence and then I would translate the sentence. But by the time we were finished the tour, like he would just talk and I would be like 4 words behind him. It was like coming into my ear and then just coming out. So I like started, and then at a certain point he would say, can you just hold the room? I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in a few minutes. And, and so I
You got
just,
tricked into it. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
no, I just, I got, it was like an apprenticeship,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it was wonderful. And so that became a very big part of my life. Before I went to Germany, long before I went to rabbinical school,
Do you think that
and
there was
through rabbinical school.
anything to the fact that you spent a lot of time abroad that you maybe didn't hold the same kind of hang-ups about sex and sexuality that
No,
are very much American?
no, I think I was. I mean, look, I was a very horny person.
Happens.
I was also a sex addicted person. I mean, I still identify as an addict, but I've been in recovery for a very long time, and it no longer makes my life unmanageable. But no, I was very sexual. Um, I was very sexual when I got to Germany, and there were, I mean, I lived in Cologne, which is a very, very gay city. Um, and, uh, but, not everybody was, I was, um, yeah, it was, um, I arrived in Germany, sexy, and I left Germany and came back sexy. I went to rabbinical school, sexy. And it was part of me.
I
So
love
it was, it wasn't squelchable.
squelch is a funny word.
Is it?
Yeah, it always makes me laugh.
Right.
Um, okay, perfect. So I I usually keep these at around an hour. I would
What?
love to have you back a second time or a
I'll,
third time or
of course.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be back.
Um, but I would like to invite you to tell leave a closing thought, like something profound or whatever. And then also tell people how to get in touch with you if they want to work with you, what type of offerings you have.
Sure.
And then
Uh,
we'll say goodbye off camera, but we'll wave
Okay.
goodbye to everyone.
Okay. All right. So I'm easily and very geekily findable. I am David Dunn Bauer, middle name Dunn, Dunn, and my website is www.daviddunnbauer.com, and it talks about I talk about my two private practices in spiritual counseling and in erotic body work. And so if you go to that website, you find the phone number, you can find the email addresses, and you can find out what I do. Um, I am, I somewhere along the line as a body worker, again, my a natural talent and then a honed expertise, uh, a talent for and honed expertise in butt play, like really became part of who I am. So um, I am the butt whisperer, and if you can contact me at davidbuttwhisperer@gmail.com. Just you can write to me there. Um, and what else? So yeah, I'm findable. And happy to talk to people about spirit, about sex, about. I mean, I have I have counseling clients where we don't talk about sex. I have bodywork clients where I talk about spirit, but it's mostly about how does your body feel. So I cover the range. You just sort of you provide a different presence for each person depending on what that person needs. And yeah, so um, right, and so in Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis, in the story of Hagar and Ishmael, Hagar is um, the maid servant to Abraham's wife, Sarah. And Sarah, when she is barren, um, kind of nominates Hagar to be her surrogate. And Hagar has a son, Ishmael, um, who is born across Sarah's lap. That's how it like the sort of ritually kind of the how do you make this child her child, Sarah's child. And then when Sarah becomes uh, fertile and has her own son Isaac, she wants Hagar and uh, this other boy, kind of the emblem of her former barrenness. She wants them out, and she forces her husband Abraham to exile Hagar and Ishmael. And Hagar is sent off, into the wilderness with a loaf of bread and a water, a water skin, and a child. Um, and in the Middle East, a loaf of bread and a skin of water isn't going to keep two people alive and for a very long time. And she reaches the point where she thinks, okay, he's going to die. I can't, I'm going to die, but he's going to die first. And so she leaves him under a bush and she goes and sits far enough away so she doesn't have to watch him die. And she has her eyes closed, and an angel of God appears to her because God has been was part of the birth of Ishmael, has promised that Ishmael would have a future, but Hagar, as the mother watching her child die of thirst, who can remember, who can remember somebody's words when your child is dying, and but the angel speaks to Hagar and says, actually says, "What is with you, Hagar? What what is your problem? Like, why are you so worried? And the angel says that God is im ha naar with the boy ba'asher husham, right where he is, right where the boy is. Um, and those are the things, you know, that was what mattered to me, I guess, you know, back in the AIDS era, it was back in my theater career, in my opera career, it was in, you know, as a rabbi, as a spiritual counselor, as a body worker, like it's being with somebody Ba'asher Husham, right where that person is.
Hmm.
Um, that is, you know, being present for somebody. That is how to channel God into that person's life, is to be present, not where you want them to be, not where you think they ought to be, not where you wish they were, whatever. No, who they are, where they are. So that I think that's one of the key parts of my theology.
I love that. And
So
thank you for sharing that story because that was not one that I knew. So
yeah, there you go. All right. Thank you. I
yeah,
appreciate it. This is
let's
fun.
say goodbye to all the people at home, and then I'm going to say goodbye to you off camera.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody at home. Thank you for your
Bye.
time. All of you who stayed. Ciao.